Hello everybody, I'm Red and I'm delighted to finally meet you all. I'm here to take you on a journey into TrueEarth, its myths, legends and stories. We will be taking a trip down memory lane and exploring some fascinating histories together. What better place to begin with than the Star Gateway itself? This gateway has been making a lot of impact in recent weeks, and I have something special to share with you all today. After quite a bit of searching and digging through old, very old archives, I have found some interesting tidbits of information regarding this infamous gateway, which resides deep, deep below the Earth's surface. There was a name for it, but despite our best efforts, we've not been able to decipher what that name actually was. I guess we'll just have to keep on calling it the Star Gateway for now. No matter. What is important is this. It turns out that it is much, much older than any of us could have suspected. The data archives themselves were so ancient, it was impossible to have them dated accurately, and the technology which was used to record them seemed to be far, far more advanced than anything we have here. It was purely by accident that a little information we managed to glean from them was even accessible. What we did find, locked away in those timeless data archives, is the legend of a human civilization predating any other. According to this data, the people of that time led simpler lives, despite being far more technologically advanced than we could even imagine. That aside, our findings spoke of a myth passed down through the generations, telling the story of the Star Gateway's creation. That, dear listeners, is what I wanted to share with you all today. Yes, it is a legend, and yes, it might not give us all the details, but it is as good a starting point as any we have so far. It's an old story, ancient, a story of young lovers, head over heels for one another. She was a baker's daughter, beautiful beyond belief. She had stolen swarms of suitor hearts, but only one had caught her eye. Only a single young man had been able to almost effortlessly sweep her off her feet, and in a gust of adoration entrapped her by his charms. Each evening she would fall asleep, dreaming of their warm embrace, hoping beyond hope that soon they might be wed. She dared not cast her thoughts beyond that point. An occasional indulgent whim made its way through her defenses, revealing a wonderful home filled with children's laughter. As we all know, love stories seldom end well in reality. He was the son of a prominent merchant family. His fate had been sealed at birth. His bride had been carefully selected, groomed and trained to not only be the perfect wife, but also the heiress of a large mercantile empire. It took only days before all the town gossip had flourished to the point where everyone but the couple themselves were discussing the horrific situation. That is, until his parents called him in under the pretext of making arrangements for his future, which of course would include the woman they had chosen to be his future bride. Many arguments broke out. It is recorded that on more than one occasion he was reminded that love had nothing to do with marriage, that it would fade in time, and that all that would be left is the wealth, stability, and social influence secured from it. His mother kept reminding him that he had a duty to fulfill, that it was his responsibility to carry on the family business which they and previous generations had built. He simply could not bear it. He knew the customs. He was all too aware how in his day and age men would get married and then maintain their loves as mistresses. The very thought of it cut him deep. He could not entertain living like that. He could not do that to the girl he loved so deeply. It was recorded that he would storm out of his home in an outburst of pure rage to take refuge walking along the waters which ran from a river sourced in the deep caverns, winding their way up and down around the city. There, in the mountainous forests, he found release. A place where no one would see, where no one would catch even the briefest glimpse of him, silently cursing in despair at the situation. He followed the watery pathways, without even bothering to pay attention as to where he was heading. Day after day, he vented his frustration, pacing up and down the riverbank. He cursed, he swore, he despaired at the world at how unfair it all was. Time passed. In between his episodes of venting, he sat and gazed at the starry reflection in the river's water, mesmerized by the bluish glow of moonlight combined with the starlight shining down from the heavens above. As the water moved, the entire stellar tapestry moved with it. In these short bursts of time, he was at peace. Nothing but the wonders etched on the watery surface mattered to him. One moment bled into the next, and into the following. Time seemed to have escaped his notice. Eventually, he ran out of steam. His anger, his desperation for a solution, were spent. He simply sat there, gazing at the dancing waters. After a while, he decided it was time for him to return to his duties and home. During his stride back, something seemed to be amiss. Things around him had changed in subtle but significant ways. The texture of the building seemed worn, aged. New structures had sprung up and old ones had been pushed aside. He could not quite put his finger on what was wrong. His mind failed to grasp it. Looking around, he questioned what his eyes presented him. Was this his hometown? It looked like it, but it wasn't. Or rather, it didn't seem to be. Desire and concern sprang into action. He made a quick detour to visit his love, only to find what he assumed was her mother stood at the doorstep of the house he had visited on so many occasions. Their eyes met for a brief instant. A sense of recognition flashed from within. The next moment, confusion was written all over her face, and shame. The voice of young children broke the silence. "Mama!" they called out as they rushed towards her, pulling on her skirt. She turned her back to him, walked through the open doorway, and left. He remained shocked, confused. His gut instinct told him this was her, his love, his life. Aged? Married? With children? Despair gripped his heart. Breathing became difficult. He tried to steady himself. How could this be? What had happened? Was this even possible? Questions flooded in from everywhere. He rushed over to his own home, heart pounding, his pulse racing, his mind desperately grasping at the thin threads of clarity that remained. Observing from a distance, he noticed his home had changed. It was no longer a mansion. Oh no, it had transformed into something monumental. It now resembled a small palace. He saw his brothers rushing about, trying to get something organized, ordering people around. He caught a glimpse of his mother. She too had aged by many, many years. She was no longer the woman he knew. Instead, she had become an old woman. Despite her age, her flair and authority had not diminished. To the contrary, it had been amplified to the point where it hung in her presence, like a cloud sulking along mountain tops. Little did he notice the hint of sadness in her gaze as she glanced at his brothers. The same had happened to his father, who was an old man, walking with the assistance of an elegant walking stick. Tears gathered in his eyes. He suppressed them, looked at the life which would have been his, which was his, and walked away with heavy footsteps. He had to get answers, and the only place he could think of was the stream of star-reflecting waters. Records indicate that he did return to that exact same spot, sat down and wandered for hours on end. Eventually, the sound of tumbling waters took on the qualities of a voice, as if the water itself was speaking to him. It explained that no matter how much he wanted for things to change back, that was not possible. This place was one of the great vortices of creation, a place where life and death held no sway. For this was the place of birth of magic. And as he wondered what to do next, he stood on the bank of the river and stretched his hands forth, reaching into the water itself. Contact with it made him feel alive. Power, fire flushed through him. He pulled his hands out of the mysterious liquid, stood up straight. It stopped. Once again, he soaked them in the glowing waters. For a moment, ecstasy washed over him. He wanted more and more. He longed for it to never stop. The thrill of power carried him to heights he had never dreamt of, washing away his sadness and longing for life. The life he had been born to lead, dissipated in the rush of magic. The legend states that he had remained there. Eventually his body changed, arched over the banks of the waters of magic, feet on the ground firmly planted on the shores, hands deep in the water. His curved form molded into that position, hardened to endure more and more power flowing through it. His back expanded upwards towards the heavens themselves. It turns out this innocent, young-hearted merchant's son had become the Star Gateway. The longing for his old life, for that which he had lost, remained but a silent echo in his mind, which now was totally consumed by magic. Legends spoke of the occasional traveller finding the gateway and being mysteriously pulled into it. No one ever surfaced out of the bluish fluid swirling vortex. All that remained was this recording, held securely in the archives. How it was made, or found for that matter, is a mystery in its own right. Could this be the very last testament to the existence of this heartbroken lover who had lost his life and the love he could never have? Who knows? Well, dear listener, this will be it from me for the time being. I will be back soon with a few more tidbits to share with you. Until then, have fun.